And similar to the Labyrinth project, we're going to be using tabloid-sized artboards, or actually just one. So that's 11 inches wide by 17 inches tall. So I'm just going to go, instead of going through presets, I'm just going to press New File. And then it's already saved in here my settings from the last project. So I have 11 inches wide, 17 inches tall. I changed this to just one artboard. We only need one for this. And I'm going to keep everything. Actually, no, we're going to change, because we're going to be printing this. So now we're going to change color mode to CMYK. CMYK is for printers, and we're going to change raster effects from screen to high, which is 300 ppi. That is the resolution that we're going to be using. Okay, and press create. Here's my artboard, 11 inches wide, 17 inches tall. And we're going to start with going over the basics of the rotate tool. But first, we have to make some objects to rotate. So obviously, we can start with very minimal shapes. We know the rectangle tool. We know the ellipse tool. We know, we briefly looked at the line segment tool, just making lines. You can absolutely use these. You can start with something simple like a square. I'm actually going to use the pen tool. I'm going to make my own shape. So click on pen tool, which is also keyboard shortcut P on your keyboard. And I'm just gonna make a little shape. It can be anything. First off, we are still just learning the pen tool first, so it's gonna be kind of a weird little shape. I don't even know what that is. Open to interpretation. Notice it looks the way it does because the fill color is white and then it has a black stroke. I want it to just be, for now, I'm just going to make it a solid fill color. And if I click on the selection tool, click back here, now I can get rid of the stroke that's on this little shape. I don't want a stroke. I mean, you can have it. Just for this demo, I don't want it. Also, I don't really like how this area here gets a little too thin. So I'm going to press A, or I can go to the direct selection tool, and I can zoom in and click on some of these anchor points and adjust the shape of the curve here. So it makes it a little bit more, a little wider at the bottom. I'm going to click out of that. So I don't really like that. Sometimes I can be perfectionist about having the curve exactly the way I want it. Let's see. All right, that'll be good enough. Okay, again, strange little abstract shape. We're gonna just leave it over here for the time being. If you notice, as I move it around, I have the little smart guides popping up as I'm moving it around because I have smart guides turned on. That can be turned off and on either through view and then checking or unchecking smart guides, or pressing Command U on your keyboard. So I'm just going to leave it right there for now. I'm going to turn on my rulers, Command R. So I have my rulers above and on the side. And we need to have a center point for everything to be rotated around. And that's going to be the exact center of our artboard. You could measure this out and put a guide, right? So 11 inches wide divided in half. That's 5.5 inches. I could measure it out manually, or I'll show you a little shortcut or a little trick to get it perfect. All right, so I want to make a guide. I'm going to pull it over from the left side, clicking on the ruler. And notice how I started dragging it over from the ruler on the left, and then I accidentally let go of the guide. And then now if I try to click on it and move it, it's not moving. Well, I want the guide over here. I don't want it over here. So if it's locked, you can right-click or control-click on the guide, and then come down and press Unlock Guides. Now I can click on it and drag it again. So if you have Smart Guides on, it probably will automatically snap to the center. So first off, that's a very easy way to center the guide. But we're also going to learn about, and I'm going to show you the Align tools options over here. On my screen, there's a little box that says Align, and I have these little icons. If you don't see that, come up to Window, and then click on Align. And when I do that on my screen, it actually brings up even more options right here. You know, it's a little bit hard to see sometimes on the screen, but yeah. So we have the Align window open. So I have this guide that's like, let's say it's too far to the left here. If I have where it says Align To at the bottom, right now it's selected on Align to Artboard, which is good. I want it aligning on the artboard. And then on my kind of top left, under Align Objects, this middle one, if I hover over it, it says Horizontal Align Center. If I click on that, it automatically aligns that object, in this case a guide, to the center of the artboard. I can do the same thing with any object I create. So this little guy I have here, if I select him, I've clicked on the little object, and I press that Align to Center, it puts it directly in the center of the artboard. I'm going to do the same thing with a guide coming from the top ruler up here. I'm going to click and drag down and click on that. I'm going to press, but instead of horizontal align center, I'm going to do vertical align center, which is over to the right on Align Object. Press that, and now it put this guide perfectly centered from top to bottom. This one's perfectly centered from left to right. So now this intersection where the two guides meet, that is exactly the center of the artboard. And so that center point is going to be the center of our mandala. This is a really great example of when you would use guides, because they're not going to show up. I can turn them off and on. They're not going to show up in what you print or what you export. They're just there as literally just guides to orient your objects around a central point or around a margin, edge, anything like that. In this case, for us, it's this central point, which is the intersection between the two. Any questions about making guides and having them aligned, top and bottom, left and right? Okay. So now we have this little object that I want to start rotating it. Now, without even using the rotate tool, if I hover my cursor close to the corner of the bounding box over here. All right, so if I hover my cursor close to the one of the corners of the bounding box after I've selected this object, it gives this little kind of curved arrow, if I click and drag it around, I can just rotate the object around its own kind of central axis. Okay? So that is an option for rotation, but we want to rotate around this center point here in the artboard. So the rotate tool is R, keyboard shortcut R on your keyboard, or it looks like this little icon on the toolbar over here. You hover over it, just says rotate tool. So if I click that, I'm going to zoom in. My cursor has changed. It looks like little crosshairs now. And I have this, another little dot with almost like little crosshairs that has appeared in the center of my object. So if I click on the object and drag it around, it's rotating around that center point there. That's how it's set automatically. It just automatically puts that center point in the exact middle of your object. So I can just rotate it around. But now I can, using the rotate tool, I can click on that center point and drag it down, and I have smart guides on, so it will snap to the center of where I made the intersection of those two guides. So I'm dragging it down, letting go. So now you can see that center point I put down right on that intersection between my two guides, which is directly in the center of the page. So now if I click on the object, still with my rotate tool, and I drag it, now it's rotating around that center point. So next step is we want to start duplicating this object around this axis here, okay? I'm going to start by what we already know as copying and pasting. If I Command C, copy the object, and then instead of just Command V, because if I press Command V, it will place it in a random other area. I'm going to hold down Command Shift V. Now it has pasted in place that object right above the other one. So I don't see either one. I don't see the second one because they're perfectly on top of each other. If I do the same thing with the rotate tool, I'm bringing that center point down. Okay, my mouse is acting up on me. Bring that one down. Then I can start rotating this. So I've copied and pasted that piece, and I can repeat that process. This is the manual way. If I press Command D, I'm duplicating. It's just duplicating that action of the rotation. Okay, so now I've selected the object again. I've recreated my guides. And with the rotate tool, now instead of dragging that center point, I'm going to hold down Option and click on that center intersection. And I get a little dialog box that pops up that's asking me what angle do I want to rotate. You can actually have it do its own math, but for example, before we do that, if I don't have it perfectly rotate the object around 360 degrees, let's say I do, and I have preview on here, so if I adjust this, I can see the adjustments of how far it rotates it. Now I'll go ahead and press copy, and then I can press Command D. But notice, because I didn't have it divided by 360 degrees, which is what's in a circle, when I duplicated it around the center, it doesn't perfectly match up. So this last one, I either have the last object too close to the first object, or if I got rid of this one, then this one, the last one is too far. That space is greater than all the others because it's not divided perfectly between the 360 degrees of a circle. Now, I can, again, manually rotate each of these and just kind of eyeball it. So if I click on the object, press the rotate tool, or R, I'm going to bring the center point back to the center of the page. Then I can start like kind of doing it by like eyeballing it, but we want to do it mathematically perfect. So let me delete these again, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so I'm clicked on this object, option, clicking in the center here, bringing up the dialog box again. And now, instead of typing in a specific angle, I can type in 360 divided by the number of objects you want. So let's say I want 17, which is kind of a weird number, a prime number. It doesn't divide evenly. But I press 300, type in 360, then / 17, which is just telling it 360 divided by 17. And then I press copy. Then when I press Command D, it's those 360 degrees are perfectly divided up between my 17 objects. Okay? Everybody following that? So that's how we have it get the perfection that we're going to need for making a really successful mandala. Any questions?
What keys make the box happen again?
Yeah, it's a very specific procedure, so I'll just go through it one more time real quick.
I have the last part.
Okay. To get the box to pop up, I've selected that object, press R, or just click on the rotate tool. And then on my keyboard, it's options. I'm assuming it is, maybe you're using a laptop. Is it a Mac? Yeah, okay, so it should just be option. And then I have smart guides on, so if I get close to the center point, it will automatically snap at the center. I hold down option and click once in the center. Yep, and then the box pops up. So it's option and clicking once you're using the rotate tool. Got it?
Yeah, that's why I was confused. It's singular.
Yeah, yeah, just option and click. And wherever you click, if I didn't have these guides and I didn't have the smart guides on where it snaps to the exact center of the page, if I accidentally option click over here, well, that's where it's going to put that center point. And then everything's going to be rotating on a different area. So that's why I put the guides there. Yeah?
So after you have the box and you type in the 360 divided by, what do you press for it to be?
Then, so 360 divided by, this time I'll do 15. I'm pressing copy. So I know it's tempting to press OK. I can't even remember. I think if you just press OK, I think it just rotates this, but we don't want to rotate it, just that one. We want to copy it. So I'm pressing copy. Then I'm pressing Command D, and that's duplicating that action.
Okay.
Command D is duplicate. Any other questions? We'll make sure we all get through this part. This is a pretty much the essential part of making mandala is the learning the rotate tool. So please speak up if you have any questions at all. Okay, great. Next up, we can, so I'm going to go ahead and control click. I'm going to lock the guides so I don't accidentally delete them again. So now that I've locked the guides, I can click and select with my selection tool over, I made a box over every object. Once I select every object, I can press Command G, which is group. I believe over here, yeah, if you option, and again, I know you can't see it, it's above the screen, but under object at the top, and then there's also, you can just click on group, but the keyboard shortcut is Command G. So I press Command G. Now, if I just click on one of them and I drag it, they're all connected to each other. So this is viewed as one whole group. And whoops, I've put it over the side. I want it in the middle. Well, guess what? We can go back to the Align tool, and now it's going to align the whole group. So I'm horizontal aligning and vertical aligning, and now it's back in the center. Okay? Once it's a group, it makes it really easy to resize. So now I can come over to the top corner where I have the diagonal arrow, and if I start clicking dragging while I can resize it, again, we don't want something stretched over like this. So I'm going to hold down Shift. But if I resize it just by holding down Shift, yes, it constrains the proportions, but now if I resize it, it's not resizing towards the center. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Option. And if I click and resize, now it's resizing from the center. Okay? So I'm holding down Shift and Option and clicking on the corner of the bounding box. And then I can drag larger or smaller. And again, I can copy it, Command C, and then paste it in place, Command Shift V. Now there's an exact copy on top of the original, and I can resize just this one the same way. So now if I make it bigger, now it's adding some other shapes here. They're interacting together. I don't really like that. Let's try it a little bit bigger. Maybe right there. You know, whatever. It's just a simple shape we're working with. I can also copy and paste, and I can just rotate without using the rotate tool. I can just come over to the corner and rotate in this around this way. Okay. And that's how we're going to start. You can repeat some of these elements and then make some of them larger, smaller, rotate them around, and they'll start doing, creating different shapes. Now also keep in mind, all of this is just from that one original shape I made. And if you look at a lot of mandalas, they're going to use different shapes, not just one that's repeated, right next to itself. Like it may every few steps you might get the same shape, and then in between it there'll be another one, and then that's repeated, and then you'll start getting other patterns happening with different shapes in between each other. But just as an example, everything I'm showing here is just using that first shape that I made. All right. A couple other things in shape building. I'm gonna delete this. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna. So it's on its own layer. Remember, open the layers window. Everything I've been working on is just on layer 1. I'm gonna lock it and turn it off. The visibility. I'm gonna turn the visibility off. Make a new layer. All right. So it's hanging out there, but I'm just not gonna look at it yet. Also, if you notice, the guides are on layer 1, so you can have different guides on different layers. So if I turn layer 1 off, I don't see the guides anymore, but that's all right for now. Now we're going to use the Pathfinder. I'm going to make some more shapes with a pen tool. I'm just going to make some sort of jagged shape here. Then I'm going to make another one maybe a more rounded shape. This is just for examples, so I'm just doing it really quick. Okay, so I have these two shapes. We can see them distinct of one another because I changed the fill color. And if you don't see your Pathfinder tool anywhere, come up to Window, and then scroll down, find Pathfinder, click on that. And this little window pops up with a bunch of different like squares that are kind of interacting with each other. If I have two shapes, let's say I have them one over the other, and so I'm going to click and we drag, I'm going to select both of them. And now I'm going to go through the different options for Pathfinder, and you can kind of encourage you to experiment with this on your own. It's going to manipulate and combine or subtract the paths and points that are interacting between these two shapes. So first off, if I hover over, it's unite. So if I click on this, it just united them into one shape. Now, this is, if I look at the paths, this is just one individual shape here that's been united by two previous shapes. I'm going to Command Z undo that. So now they're back to being two shapes. I'm selecting them again. Next one is minus front. Click on that. That path that was made by that round shape gets subtracted, and now what's left is the parts from the bottom shape that were visible. So everything above that got subtracted. Command Z. Let's go to the next one. Intersect. Basically the opposite happens. Command Z. The rest of these merge is, again, kind of similar. Some of these you're not going to see much difference happening, except for a crop, which basically made the same shape as I think it was either intersect or exclude. But some of them is just a way to, like if I divide it, then I can start manipulating. I can delete like this section here because it divided the paths from each other. So now this section that's just kind of not connected, not being overlapped with either one, it functions as its own shape. It's still there, but I can delete it or I can move it out now. So this Pathfinder tool can get very complicated and is actually a lot more powerful than it may seem at first, just with me kind of manipulating amoebas basically. You will use it heavily going forward in future projects probably, depending on what we end up doing. But at its core, it is just another tool for shape building. Let me show you just a real quick example why we might use a Pathfinder tool. So let's say I want to get, kind of like I'll make an eyeball. So let's say I want to get an eyeball shape. That's not too bad, but it's not perfect, okay? If I want perfectly symmetric eyeball, like mathematically perfect, I can go into my ellipse tool, make a circle. I'm going to duplicate that circle over here. And actually, so it's easier to see, let's make them no fill. I can combine them. Oops. I can overlap them here. Now I can select these two circles, and which one would it be? Yeah, there we go. Now I have mathematically perfect eyeball shape. Okay? That's an example of how we might build shapes a different way than just kind of doing it manually. And this is what you need, especially if you're working with different logos or something in an ad agency in your future. You have to do things perfectly. You can't, unless you're going for more like a hand-drawn effect, your vectors and objects need to be perfect, okay? So again, kind of going a little out of the scope of this project, but it's important to start understanding these different methods for shape building, especially as we build shapes that we use for our mandala. Okay, great. All right, so now on the assignment page, I have a little link to a website for choosing color palettes. It's just a handy, you don't necessarily have to use this site, but it does come in handy. It's coolors.co. So I click on that. I'm gonna press start the generator. Or actually, let's explore trending palettes first. You will have to choose a color palette that you're going to stick with for your mandala. And these are, other people have made these palettes, so you don't have to use any of these. We're just kind of seeing maybe some trendy color palettes. All right, so if I choose one, I click on the little dots, pressing opening in generator, and I'll get this screen here, which will show the colors beside each other. And then I can move these around by clicking on the little drag tool. Let's say I want to see how the this kind of sky blue looks next to the yellow, so I can drag that. It's like, oh, those kind of look a little weird together, so then I can, let's just say I make this a little bit darker or something. So you can start creating your own palettes, but again, if you just want to find one that's already been made that you like, that is completely fine. But you do have to choose a color palette of, so I'm going to open it. What I like to do is I'm going to screenshot this palette here. So if I press Command-Shift-4 on my keyboard, it opens up these little crosshairs. I can screenshot these colors here. I'm dragging over. Okay. And it'll be on my desktop. I'm going to drag it over to my project. If I come back into Adobe Illustrator and then bring open that window, I can drag and drop that file, that screenshot, into my Illustrator project. Now I can use the eyedropper tool to very quickly change the colors of objects. So this little eye here, I've selected it. Eyedropper looks like this. Looks like a little. Well, yeah, it looks like an eyedropper. On the tools, it's also the I keyboard shortcut. Then I can come up here and click on magenta. Okay. Now once again, I click on this object, press I, say I don't like the magenta, I want it to be the yellow. I can bring over here, select this yellow color, and it changes it to the same color. So that's an easy way to choose a palette and then easily change colors. Actually, let's try that with the that circular shape that I made. I'm going to turn it back on so I can see it. So let's say I want to change some of these colors. Again, if I click on it, I grouped them together. So if I click on it, it selects the whole group. If I do the eyedropper tool, it changes the color of the whole group of these rotated objects. If I want to change the color of just one, I can either ungroup it and change the individual color, or I can just double click, which opens isolation mode, click on the one that I want to change, then for the eyedropper, click on the magenta. I can press V again or the selection tool, double click in a blank area, and now I've changed the color of just one. So I made a new layer. It usually puts a new layer on top of the other layers, but because this is going to be our background layer, I'm going to drag it below to the bottom. Now I'm going to click on the rectangle tool again, which we're familiar with. And then instead of clicking and dragging, if I just click once, I can type in for width 11, and type in height 17, press OK. And then I can, again, we can use the alignment tool, so I can press center line, horizontal and vertical. Now the rectangle is perfectly aligned with the artboard because it's the exact same size. Now I want to start using gradients on this rectangle shape. There's a bunch of different types of gradients, which can be seen on the assignment page, that example there for under the inspiration section. If I just press G, so I've selected on this object, if I press G, that brings up the gradient tool. I can click and drag. Actually, sorry, one second. Come up here first for your colors, and then look for the different gradients on the left side, like this one. I mean, I know it, okay, sorry, it cuts off. Let me drag this over. Some of these that look like gradients over here. For instance, I'm just clicking on one orchid. It goes this gradient from left to right, kind of this pink to white. Now if I press G, I can change this bar, which controls the gradient. So if I click on the right point of this bar, I can stretch or squish the gradient left horizontally. Same for, if I click on the left side, I can actually move the bar around. It will do the same thing, moving the gradient. If I hover my cursor over to get a little kind of circle arrow on it, I can rotate this bar, and that rotates the gradient. So right now, this is just a linear gradient. It's just going from one color to the next, left to right, up, down, back, forth, whichever direction you have it. I can also shorten it. So it's a more a sharper transition, or extend it so it's more gradual. Then to change the color, the colors are here on the little circles. If I double click, I can change, let's see, I'll change it to yellow. Changes the color that way. It's a little bit easier to come over under, I'm going to click out of it, under Window and Gradient. If I click on this, it opens a gradient window. So again, I click on the object. I can basically do the same thing using the window controls over here, but I also can, again, use the eyedropper, which I turned off the palette I have. If you select the slider to the left side, which is kind of this purple, I can double click on the fill color over here and change it manually. Say I change it to a dark blue, change the color this way. let's change this side to red. But notice when I click on the circle on this side, it says opacity 0. So it's showing it as basically being transparent. And then as the transparency decreases, we start getting more red, but the red is then blending with the blue. If I bring it up to 100% opacity, it'll go straight blending that blue to that red, full opacity on each. I can also change it to a radial gradient. So right now under the gradients window, there's these three options: linear gradient, radial gradient, and freeform gradient. So radial does the same thing. I can now change the size of the gradient in the center, or I can come back over, click on it, drag it out, edit it this way. But you can also put in more than 2 colors. You can basically blend as many colors as you want together. To do that, in between the 2 circles, we have the gradient slider here, which changes how they start blending together. If I click anywhere in here and it's right below it. If I click, it will add another circle. So I'm clicking right below this color bar. So now I've added a third circle, which I then can, let's just change this one to green. All right, it's gonna start looking real gross. But now it's going from the blue, transitioning to the green, and then to the red. And then the colors blending are what makes this kind of like oranginess in between the green and red. Let's change this to white. So it's almost like a little halo type thing. And I can keep adding more. I can add a bunch of these circles and do all kinds of other colors in here. And you can start getting some really funky things. This also applies to linear gradients. If I come back over and click on linear gradient, it does the same thing, but instead of radially, just from left to right, or top to bottom and such. I can click on freeform gradient, and then it's going to reset everything, and it'll give me these 4 circles in the corner. I can click and I can drag them around. If I start dragging them around, the colors will start blending in different ways. So these are the points. I can come over here to where it says lines, click on lines, and then do the same thing. And it's blending the points of the lines. You can start getting all kinds of cool interactions. And this will look a lot better once you stick with a specific palette, not just random colors being chosen. Okay, any questions about the gradient options? All right, I'm going to turn my shape back on. And then now I'm going to lock this, unlock these. I'm going to make them all white. Now I can start using blend modes to blend some of these shapes and colors with the background gradients. So if I'm gonna lock the background, if I click on one of these grouped objects, I can come over here to transparency. If you don't see this, you can come back up to Window and Transparency here. You can select it manually. When I have it selected, actually I'm going to select all of them. under, right now this is normal, it's normal appearance. I can also just lower the opacity, so now they start blending together with the background. But we're gonna do some blend mode. So under normal, I'm gonna change it to, a good one to start off with is overlay. So now, like the purples and reds are kind of bleeding through and blending together with the white shapes. We can try a bunch of different ones to see what we like. I'm actually going to change the fill color of these to something else, to green. And then it starts blending them together and makes kind of a yellow effect, but then adds some other blues and such. This is a really good way to start having it all feel unified. So instead of just having like this kind of stark color of a mandala just kind of standing out in front of the page, everything can start blending and fitting together a little more nicely. So this is just under the transparency window, and these are blend modes. I'm gonna extend this shape out a lot. So let's say I want, you don't have to have your mandala go to the edge. It can just be in the center. You can try a lot of different designs with how it's constructed. But say I do want to go to the edge, and so I expanded the shape, but it goes beyond the borders. Now, if I export this, no, it's not going to show everything that's past the edge of the artboard. However, it looks kind of messy. I don't like looking at it this way because it's hard for me to see exactly the whole composition of this artboard. This is where we can use a clipping mask to basically act as like it's cropping everything outside of the artboard. So I'm going to come back over to rectangle tool, click once, make another 11 by 17 rectangle. I'm just going to change it to white so that it's a little different color from the green. I'm going to come back over to align it in the artboard. Now if I come over and select everything, and I have that background layer of the gradient, I have it locked. So when I select all this, it's not selecting the gradient layer. And make sure the rectangle is over the tool that you want to crop. Then if I right click or control click, I can press make clipping mask. And it looks like it crops everything to the 11 by 17. It's just nicer, like if I'm making other designs, it's better to, I don't have to look at all the stuff that's on the outside. A little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to see.